Thank you. Now, before I start my talk, I want to introduce to you all a giant of the civil rights movement in Dallas. And we're talking about standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. But I got my ancestor right here. This is Sister Ava McMillan. And not 50 years ago, not 60 years ago, but 70 years ago in the 1940s, she was registering voters right across that freeway in an area that was known as Short North Dallas. Right. Back then she had to collect a poll tax before she could register him. And one of the main reasons we don't have a poll tax in Dallas is because of people like Ava McMillan. So she's here among us and we want to give her all due props. Now, Ms. McMillan's carrying a sign that seems to equate Selma and Dallas. Selma, Dallas. Selma, Dallas. And you might think that there's not a specific connection. But let me explore that with you for a minute. Now, the march from Selma to Montgomery was about voting rights. But the occasion for that march was the murder of a guy named Jimmy Lee Jackson. Jimmy Lee Jackson was one of the civil rights workers working in Selma, and he was killed by a Alabama state trooper named Jason Howard. Now, you might not be too surprised to know that the grand jury in Selma there declined to indict Jason Howard. Declined to indict him. Now, 40 years later, he was charged with murder. He was convicted of manslaughter, and he got his just desserts. He got a whopping 6-month sentence, of which he served 4 months. Now, what's the connection, you might be saying? For the past 40 years, in this Dallas County, the city of Dallas police officers have killed hundreds of men, mainly black and Latino men, many of them unarmed. Some of them mentally ill. And do you know that since 1973, we have not had one indictment of a Dallas police officer in a fatal shooting? We've gone through 3 or 4 district attorneys. Every single one is found justified. All right, now there's another connection I want to bring to you here. The mayor in Selma, now let me not go with that one. Let me go with this one. The week Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed, in the movie, you know, Dr. King is talking to LBJ and he's saying, I don't want to do the voting rights right now because I want to concentrate on the war on poverty. But don't you know, the very week that Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed, which by the way was the same week Malcolm X was shot to death in New York, LBJ was furiously bombing Vietnam in the first of many waves of escalating that war. The first 100,000 troops of the U.S. were landing in Vietnam in March when the people were marching in Selma. In all, 600,000 Americans went to Vietnam. For what? 50,000 of them never came home. 50,000 of them. 3 million Vietnamese died. Now let me just say first, before I say the next thing, I wake up every morning and I thank God Barack Obama's president of the United States. But a little over 10 years ago, President George W. Bush opened the gates of hell in the Middle East when he invaded Iraq, a country that had never attacked us, that wasn't our enemy, and that actually had been our ally. And we are paying the price for that even today. More than 4,000 men and women in the U.S. military lost their lives in Iraq. More than 30,000 were wounded. And today this country has military bases in virtually every nation on earth. Now supposedly they're there to protect American citizens and defend human rights. And yet this same federal government, in spite of all the progress, can't find a civil rights violation when a black man is strangled to death almost on live TV in New York City. They can't find a civil rights violation when a transit cop in Oakland shoots down a kid named Oscar Grant. They can't find a civil rights violation when an unarmed black man named Michael Brown is shot over 6 times to death in Ferguson. And we can't get a conviction here when a young man named Clinton Allen is shot 7 times by a Dallas police officer, 1 time at close range in the back. We can't get a conviction here. We can't get an indictment when a man named Jason Harrison, a mentally ill man, is shot 5 times by 2 police officers, twice in the back. And this happened last summer in Dallas County, Texas. So, while we commemorate the march, we want to stand on those shoulders. We want to bring it. We want to rise to the struggle of our own time to stop, as Dr. King said, the giant triplets of racism, militarism, and materialism. Thanks a lot. Keep up the fight.